Metal Gear Solid 3 is a game that came out 14 years ago, and today I'm going to make a video explaining why I still think it holds up even today. Back in 2015, Metal Gear Solid 5 was released, and everyone was so hyped, myself included, only to be entirely let down by a game that was unfinished, had countless problems, and just left a sour taste in most people's mouths. For me, Metal Gear Solid was pretty much my favourite series, but after Metal Gear Solid 5, it actually retroactively ruined any good memories I had of the franchise. Consequently, I haven't played any of them since. Metal Gear Solid HD Collection recently became backwards compatible on Xbox One, so I decided I'd replay Metal Gear Solid 3, which is my favourite game in the franchise, and probably my most replayed game of all time. For all intents and purposes, this playthrough was a blind playthrough for me, as it had been so long since I last played that I've forgotten all the intricacies. Immediately, I found myself spending time on the codec and finding myself entertained by just how much effort was put into this. The codec in Metal Gear Solid hasn't been a real thing since the third game, as both the fourth and the fifth entry to a much larger extent more or less did away with it. And yet, here I was, in a 14-year-old game, I'm having codec conversations with a codec team that feels alive, that actually has soul, and some of the interactions were genuinely hilarious.
Anything to do with the mission and...
Because she never shuts up. Yes, that's it.
No, that's not it. Snake, tell him that's not true.
It was quickly apparent that the game also wastes no time getting into the actual story, something Metal Gear Solid 5 lacked entirely. It sets up the premise it wants to, quickly, and extremely well. Metal Gear Solid 3's story can best be equated to a James Bond film. Hideo Kojima, the series' creator, has always said how much he wanted to be a movie director, but he himself seems to forget that he pretty much did just that perfectly with Metal Gear Solid 3, and for whatever reason, he kept spiralling down that hole with the later games, much to their detriment. To start with, we're introduced to the boss, Snake's old mentor, and one of the best thought out characters in a video game. We're introduced to her via an apparent betrayal of Snake after meeting him again, only to hand a nuclear launch device to the villain, and both break Snake then throw him off a bridge, presumably to his death, while also stealing a huge nuclear launch capable tank. It's within the first 30 minutes of the game that we've already established a clear, concise story, more so than the entire 100 plus hours of Metal Gear Solid 5 ever did. After this, which amounts to more or less a tutorial section, we're sent right back at it to fix the problems that have arisen due to what we just saw occur. On top of that, the game's soundtrack is absolutely top notch and remains so for the entirety of the game. This leads me to the actual gameplay of 3. It took me a few minutes to get used to the controls. Some may say they're dated, but they fit the game and its purpose entirely. You're not overloaded with hundreds of completely useless moves like the later games. You can crouch, go prone, lean left and right and stand up on your toes for extra height. There's a very satisfying CQC system, and all the guns suit a unique purpose. The only mark I'll give against the gameplay is the inability to crouch walk, which was introduced in the next series entry. Other than that, once you get used to it, it feels completely natural. Another great part is just how much you can do in the gameplay. You can stick TNT to enemies' backs, lure enemies to explosive barrels, throw poisonous animals at them. If you can think of it, chances are you can do it. The game world spans various regions from jungles to caves to mountaintops to industrial fortresses. They did a very good job designing each area, and they all feel like a challenge to complete, especially for me, since I decided to jump straight back into extreme mode for some reason, and the enemies can prove quite challenging at times. Eventually, you'll come to some of the fantastic boss fights in this game. The first one is probably the weakest, but after that they just keep getting better. From an invisible crossbow wielding freak, to a legendary sniper fought across 3 vast areas, which as a side note later games tried very hard and failed to replicate, to a soldier who wears a spacesuit with a jetpack and packs a ridiculous flamethrower. Throughout the course of the game, you'll occasionally be ambushed by the boss again. This shows quite a bit about the boss and Snake, how she seems to be hiding something whenever they meet, how Snake feels helpless against her superior skill, and eventually, how Snake seems to be reaching her level. It makes you feel for the character, and the boss is one of the best I've ever seen in a video game. They also managed to make a believable, strong female character without all the associated cancer that usually accompanies that. We're told, and shown, believably, why she handily kicks Snake's ass, and why even the monstrous 6'5" electric casting monster of a main antagonist is terrified to piss her off.
Is that it?
Not that.
Eventually, you make it to the main area of the game, a giant fortress hidden beside a mountain called Groznygrad. It's here where you'll finally encounter the huge nuclear tank which you've been sent to destroy, and things go south again. It's yet again that we notice Snake is only moderately getting his ass kicked by the boss, whereas before he was getting totally stomped. It's a great little subtle change that I actually never picked up on before. After a while, you get back to the facility and proceed to supposedly destroy the massive tank after a battle with Volgin himself. It's after this that one of the best endgames in video game history starts. Not only didn't Volgin fall after you successfully defeated him in battle, he also steals the massive nuclear tank, throws any evil plans he had out the window and just goes hard out chasing you, in the absolute best escape scene in video game history. It's here where I can kind of see why Hideo Kojima wanted to be a movie director, because this sequence is absolutely stunning. I'm getting pursued by a fuck-off massive nuclear tank.
Up ahead!
Being followed by a cowboy on a motorbike. To just witnessing the carnage as Volgin goes ham and absolutely destroys everything in sight. Another mark I tend to put on Metal Gear Solid 5's record is its weak attempts to retcon and tack on to events present in Metal Gear Solid 3. Where they were executed perfectly in 3, 5 tries to change the events or outright retcon them, and that was probably the reason I retroactively had my good memories of this game ruined. But now I just consider 5 completely non-canon, as anyone else should, and I can enjoy these fantastic moments in Metal Gear Solid 3 without the issue of knowing that 5 completely ruins them. Once you finally reach the end of the game, you have one final task, to defeat the boss. By this point in the game, you've actually grown attached to her, and you feel the exact same as Snake, who doesn't want to do this either. The boss is not only an absolutely stunning boss fight which puts all your acquired knowledge to the test, but is an absolutely fantastic character. Her motivations are noble and just, and we eventually find out she's pretty much the hero of the entire series, and any animosity you may have still felt towards her is completely gone.
Take this. Keep it safe. It's our only hope.
Once you finally defeat the boss, the game makes you do something that no other game has managed to match. You're actually forced to finish the job, and then we find out the truth of the entire story.
There's only room for one boss and one Snake.
Metal Gear Solid 3 is a game that knew exactly what it wanted to be, what it wanted to achieve, and it just did it. There was no excess fat, no unnecessary rubbish, something Metal Gear Solid 5 should have taken notes from, and it's just one of, if not the best video game you'll ever play. A lot of online lists will put a Metal Gear Solid game in their top 5, and it's usually Metal Gear Solid 3, and there's a very good reason for that. As I was saying earlier in this video, the experience of Metal Gear Solid 3 actually retroactively let me forget the mess that 5 did to the series. If you've ever had a chance to play this game, or you haven't already, you're doing yourself a disservice by not doing so.